America's royal families. The Rockefellers. Thank you to Heyday for sponsoring this video. The name Rockefeller is synonymous with extreme wealth in America. You may have ice skated in Rockefeller Center or watched the annual Christmas tree lighting on NBC. Perhaps you're nostalgic for the 90s hip-hop created by Roc-A-Fella Records. Or you live in one of the many states where the name Rockefeller has appeared frequently on ballots. But who are the members of this prominent and obscenely wealthy dynasty from the Gilded Age? Let's meet their ruthless founder, Standard Oil tycoon John D. Rockefeller, the richest man who ever lived, and his relatives who left their marks in business, politics, philanthropy, and eccentricity. From a U.S. vice president who died in his mistress's embrace, to the first female judge at a Westminster dog show. From a young explorer who may have been eaten by cannibals, to an environmentalist who is fighting against her family's fossil fuel legacy. The Rockefeller family is full of surprises. In 1723, Johann Peter left the small village of Rockenfeld in the German Rhineland and set sail for America. He found success and built a plantation in New Jersey. His grandson, Gottfried Rockefeller, and his taller, smarter wife, Lucy, built a farm in upstate New York. They had 10 children, including William, who was known as Devil Bill. He traveled the countryside hawking phony elixirs, then lending his profits to desperate farmers who couldn't get bank loans. When they inevitably defaulted, he claimed their land and resold it. The slick con artist often pretended to be deaf and mute and wrote on a chalkboard to gain sympathy. He was employing this ruse when he knocked on the door of a rich man and caught the eye of his teenage daughter. Eliza said she would marry the handsome salesman if only he weren't deaf. Bill had a miraculous recovery, then conducted Eliza and her $500 dowry down the aisle. This was rather a surprise to his girlfriend, Nancy Brown. Bill hired Nancy as a housekeeper and fathered 2 children with her right under his wife's nose. Eliza gave birth to 3 sons and 3 daughters. Bill was not the father of the year. He left for months at a time to sell snake oil under the name Doc Levingston, then showed up randomly with a wad of cash and toys, winning everyone over before disappearing again. Bill even cheated his own sons, saying he wanted to make them sharp. The family moved often to evade his wrongdoing, eventually ending up on the frontier town of Cleveland, Ohio. In 1849, Bill raped a maid at gunpoint. To escape the law, he abandoned his family for good and made a bigamous second marriage to Margaret Allen. John D. Rockefeller was 15 when he became the man of the house. He had absorbed his father's shrewdness and love of money. As a boy, he found a nest of wild turkey eggs and started his own poultry business. But his mother, Eliza, was his greater influence. She instilled the values of hard work, thrift, and Christian charity. John's lifelong philosophy was, get money, get it honestly if you can, and give it wisely. The teenager went to every large firm in Cleveland, offering himself as a bookkeeper, but there was a recession and no one was hiring. After hearing no from everyone on the list, he started back at the top and tried again. On September 26, 1855, he was finally offered a job at a produce firm. For the rest of his life, he celebrated Job Day even more than his birthday. Like J.D. Rockefeller, growing veggies and creating and stocking farm-fresh produce has always appealed to me. If creating your own farm, sans mud and waking up with a rooster sounds lovely and relaxing to you, then check out Heyday. This game lets you grow your farm utopia, where the sun always shines, the pies are always hot, and the breeze is filled with gentle guitar. Care for cute animals or build an agricultural empire. It's up to you in Heyday. Design your perfect farm from the ground up with endless ways to personalize. Comment your farm name under the video, and I will randomly select one winner to receive a History Tea Time hoodie on December 15th. Download for free on iOS and Android. Download Heyday today by clicking on the link in the description or scanning the QR code. And now, back to history. John D. Rockefeller worked diligently and kept perfect books. He made sure no one overcharged his employers, even by a penny, and was unfailingly polite but determined to collect on every debt. In 2 years, he was promoted to partner. Then he set up his own produce firm. All the while, he supported his mother and siblings and donated to charity. When the Civil War broke out in 1861, the Union Army required huge amounts of food, and John's profits soared. While attending an accounting class, he met teacher Setty Spellman. She was his match in intellect, determination, and faith. They were married in 1864, and Setty gave birth to 5 children. The war and overhunting had disrupted the whaling industry, how most people got oil to fuel lamps and light their homes. John saw opportunity in the emerging industry of crude oil, a large underground deposit of the substance, which results naturally from the breakdown of fossils and organic matter, had recently been discovered in Pennsylvania. The technology to refine it into usable kerosene was in its infancy. John invested in an oil refinery and worked on the floor to learn everything about the business. Buying barrels was a big overhead, so John set up a workshop to make his own, cutting the cost from $2.50 to $1 each. Most refineries were able to extract about 60% kerosene out of the crude oil. Then they dumped the byproducts into rivers and lakes, which frequently caught fire. But John turned the 40% remainder into lubricating oils, petroleum jelly, paving tar, and paraffin wax. John went all in on oil and was often leveraged up to his eyeballs. But he was eerily calm under pressure and fearless in his expansions. His business partners, the Clark brothers, not so much. They accepted a buyout of $72,000, about $1 million today, and John became the sole owner of what was now called Standard Oil. He took on a new, more ruthless partner, Henry Morrison Flagler. But they weren't the only refining game in town. The industry had boomed, and now there was far more supply than demand. John made a handshake deal with the 3 largest railroads that he would get discounted rates on shipping his oil. This allowed him to drop his prices so cheap that other refiners could not compete. In 1862, he orchestrated what became known as the Cleveland Massacre. Before his competitors were forced into bankruptcy, he made what he saw as a very generous offer to buy them out for pennies on the dollar. He acquired 22 of the 26 refineries in Cleveland. With his name now mud in the Midwest, he packed up for New York City and moved his family into a mansion on West 54th Street. Standard Oil now controlled 90% of the U.S. oil industry. The remaining little guys were allowed to survive to uphold the illusion of competition. This was all 100% legal at the time, but the public was outraged. Protests soared, railroad tracks were destroyed, and refineries sabotaged. In 1890, the Sherman Antitrust Act outlawed monopolies and anti-competitive agreements in favor of consumer protection. But Standard Oil used political leverage and bribery to skirt this ruling for another 21 years. Though John always appeared cool under pressure, the stress caused all of his hair to fall out. He could afford toupees. At 58, he retired to Kykuit, his estate on the Hudson River in New York. He still owned 25% of the company. In 1911, the Supreme Court finally forced Standard Oil to break into 34 smaller companies, including ExxonMobil and Chevron. While John lost some power, he gained a great deal of wealth. By 1914, he was America's first billionaire. He owned 3% of the nation's GDP. That's about $400 billion today, putting him well ahead of Musk, Zuckerberg, and Bezos. John D. Rockefeller was arguably the richest man who ever lived. He spent his retirement giving away some of his wealth. SETI had been focused on philanthropy for years and had supported the foundation of a university for Black women in Atlanta, named Spelman College in her honor. John was overwhelmed by thousands of requests from charities. So, as usual, he took a systematic approach. He modernized philanthropy by creating foundations that targeted specific issues, and he judged their success with hard data. John's efforts were responsible for eradicating yellow fever and hookworm in the United States. He founded the University of Chicago, Rockefeller University, and Central Philippine University. He also funded the Sao Paulo Eugenics Society, a program to breed out the poor, disabled, and people of color in Brazil. John was a devout Baptist. He was a teetotaler and taught Sunday school and Bible studies with his wife. In 1915, SETI died at the age of 75. John set up a memorial fund in her honor. To stave off loneliness, he visited his old business partner, Henry Flagler, in Ormond Beach, Florida. John built an estate there called the Casements, where he threw elaborate Christmas parties. He handed out shiny dimes to children, servants, neighbors, and even other retired magnates who played golf with him. John died in 1937, 2 weeks shy of his 98th birthday. He was buried in Lakeview Cemetery in Cleveland. His 4 daughters and 1 son grew up very differently than he had. The Browning School, now an elite boys' private school in New York City, was established for their education. Elizabeth Bessie attended Vassar College. Her father paid for a new dormitory, which was named Strong Hall in her honor. She married philosopher Charles Strong. Bessie had long suffered heart problems. While living in France, she died of a stroke at 40. Charles raised their 9-year-old daughter, Margaret, in Italy. She married ballet impresario Jorge de Cuevas. Their daughter, Elizabeth de Cuevas, created monumental sculptures. Alta married Ezra Prentice on the stair landing of her parents' mansion. Her father gave her a trust of 12,000 shares of Standard Oil, worth $9 million, $220 million today. The couple had 3 children and set up Mount Hope Farm in Massachusetts, one of the premier experimental farms in the country. They employed geneticists to develop more profitable cattle and poultry. Their son, John Rockefeller Prentice, pioneered farm animal artificial insemination. His only child, Abra Prentice Wilkin, founded Prentice Women's Hospital in Chicago. Edith liked to spend extravagantly on clothes and hats. She often clashed with her frugal father and was not allowed to attend finishing school. She married Harold McCormick, son of the inventor of the mechanical reaper. The newlyweds spent their first 2 years in Iowa, where Harold managed a branch of his father's business. They then had a mansion and extensive gardens built in the Lake Forest suburb of Chicago. They welcomed 5 children, though their eldest, John, died at 4 from scarlet fever. The couple established the John McCormick Institute of Infectious Diseases, which later isolated the bacteria responsible for the disease. Edith traveled to Switzerland to be treated for depression by renowned psychiatrist Carl Jung. She became a disciple and paid for his books to be translated into English. Jung inspired Americans Catherine Briggs and Isabel Myers to develop their famous personality test. So if you know what your personality type is, you can thank Edith Rockefeller. I'm an ENTJ. After extensive study, she returned to Chicago to set up her own psychoanalysis practice. She provided Irish author James Joyce with a monthly income and donated the land for Brookfield Zoo. In 1921, Edith and Harold began a contentious divorce. He promptly married a Polish opera singer. Edith, now 49, announced her engagement to Edward Kern, a 28-year-old Austrian architect. But they broke up. Despite the scandal, Edith maintained her place atop Chicago as a gay divorcee. Her claim to be the reincarnated wife of King Tutankhamun, whose tomb had just been explored and was a hot topic, made the papers. In 1925, Edith and other ladies organized the first Women's World's Fair to celebrate the achievements of American women. Edith died of breast cancer in 1932, age 59, surrounded by her children. John Dee's only son, John Jr., was 23 when his father handed him the keys to the kingdom. He was a director at Standard Oil and J.P. Morgan's U.S. Steel Company for 13 years. In the lead-up to the Supreme Court breakup of the company, Jr. stepped down. Nevertheless, he and his family held large portions of shares and continued to have oversight and rake in millions. While aboard President William McKinley's yacht on a cruise to Cuba, he got to know Abby Aldrich, daughter of a Rhode Island senator. They married in 1901 and had 6 children. In 1913, miners went on strike against one of Jr.'s companies, the Colorado Fuel and Iron Corporation. They were protesting deadly conditions. The company responded by evicting their families. They set up tents and continued the strike. John Jr. hired militia, who shot and killed the strike leader, then fired at families fleeing the scene. 20 people, including women and children, were murdered. John Jr. was widely blamed for the Ludlow massacre and the dreadful labor conditions that caused it. His father even testified that he would have taken no action to prevent the atrocity. Jr. hired public relations pioneer William King, who advised him to rescue the Rockefeller reputation by going to Colorado, meeting miners, and hearing their grievances. This novel approach attracted wide media attention. The incident was a watershed moment in the labor movement and led to bills banning child labor and establishing the national 8-hour workday. During the Great Depression, Jr. financed the construction of 14 Art Deco buildings in Midtown Manhattan, known as Rockefeller Center. He attracted high-profile tenants, General Electric, Chase Bank, the Associated Press, Time Inc., RCA, RKO, and NBC. The latter built Radio City Music Hall and installed several studios in the largest skyscraper, 30 Rock. Studio 8H was originally the home of the NBC Symphony Orchestra, but it has housed Saturday Night Live since 1975. The Today Show, The Tonight Show, and Late Night are also filmed in the plaza. Rockefeller Center is famous for its ice skating rink, watched over by an iconic gilded statue of Prometheus, bringing fire from Mount Olympus, and for its 100-foot-tall live Christmas tree, an annual tradition which began in 1933. In 1994, NYC-based hip-hop artists Damon Dash, Sean Jay-Z Carter, and Kareem Burke founded the record label Roc-A-Fella. It was not associated with the Rockefeller family, but was a play on their famous name and the idea that their music would rock a fellow. Like his father, John Jr. funneled his ill-gotten millions into philanthropic projects, giving over $537 million in his life. Jr. supported several natural and historic conservation projects, including the reconstruction of Colonial Williamsburg, Virginia, a 300-acre living history museum. Abby founded the Museum of Modern Art in 1929. John Jr. died in 1960, age 86, and was buried in the family plot in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. His only daughter, Abby, called Babs, married 3 times and had 2 children. As heir apparent, John III took over many of his father's endeavors and sat on the board of over 20 charities. He founded the Asia Society and the United Negro College Fund, which has helped 500,000 students attend university. In 1940, he and his 4 brothers formed the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. In the 50s, he led the committee to build Lincoln Center. John III was killed in a car accident in 1978, age 72. He and his wife, chemistry heiress Blanchette Hooker, had 4 children. Sandra was a ballroom dancer. Hope was a journalist and wrote for Long Island Newsday, China Daily, The Village Voice, and The Washington Monthly. She married and moved to New Mexico to raise her 3 sons. She bought the Santa Fe Reporter in 1988. In 96, she was the state's 3rd richest resident. Alida married Mark Dayton, part of the family that founded Target. They had 2 sons before divorcing in 1986. Mark went on to be elected a U.S. Senator and governor for Minnesota. John D. Rockefeller IV, known as Jay, joined the Peace Corps, where he became friends with its founder, Sargent Shriver, and his brother-in-law, Robert F. Kennedy. Jay ran the Corps' largest overseas program in the Philippines. When Senator RFK was assassinated, Jay's uncle, then governor of New York, Nelson Rockefeller, offered him the vacant seat, but he refused. Instead, he stood for election and was voted Secretary of State in West Virginia in 1968. In 76, he was elected governor. In 84, he was elected to the U.S. Senate, where he served 6 terms. He spent millions of his own money on each campaign. In 1992, he considered a run for president, but instead endorsed Bill Clinton. Jay traveled to the Middle East in 2002 and advocated for the Affordable Care Act. He was criticized as out of touch by West Virginia's collapsing coal mining industry. He retired in 2014. He and his wife Sharon have 4 children. John D. Rockefeller V, aka Jamie, is Scholastic Director of the Maryland Chess Association and has 3 children, Laura, Sophie, and John Rockefeller VI, born in 2007. Valerie Rockefeller Wayne has brought her great-great-grandfather's legacy full circle. She is co-chair of Bank FWD, a network focused on persuading banks to phase out financing for fossil fuels, a leading cause of the climate change crisis. Charles and Justin are both IT finance bros. When Nelson was born, his mother Abby said that she had done her duty by the family and given them a John III. This one was hers. Nelson struggled in lessons and would often disappear on the way to school. He was once found exploring the city's sewers. Throughout his childhood, he believed that he had a low IQ. It turns out he had undiagnosed dyslexia. His mother, who would have been a politician herself in a different time, advised him to surround himself with smart people. She instilled in him the values of capitalism and social justice. In 1940, he was appointed by FDR to work with Latin American countries to help raise their standard of living and counter Nazi influence. He was Undersecretary of Health, Education, and Welfare under Eisenhower. In 1958, Nelson was elected governor of New York and re-elected 3 times. He expanded the state's university system, the medical system, constructed Albany's Empire State Plaza, and created the New York Council on the Arts. Nelson was a Republican, but considered very liberal within the party. He supported civil rights and social safety net programs. Those who aligned were called Rockefeller Republicans. However, in an effort to appear tough on crime, he pushed forward the harshest drug laws in the country, which are criticized to this day for disproportionately targeting Black and Latino communities. Nelson had numerous extramarital affairs. He and Mary stayed together for public appearance and their 5 children. He sought the Republican nomination for president in 1960. But after losing to Richard Nixon, he divorced Mary and promptly wed his mistress, Margarita Fittler, known as Happy. She was 18 years his junior and was already married. The paternity of her daughter, Melinda, was an open secret. Rockefellers chuckled when referring to Nelson as her, quote, step-father. The scandal was a serious setback to his public image. He lost the nomination for president in 64 and 68. In 1974, President Nixon resigned amid the Watergate scandal. His VP, Gerald Ford, was promoted and selected Nelson as his vice president. He was in office for 25 months, but decided to retire from politics rather than be Ford's running mate in the 76 election. Unbeknownst to the public, the 68-year-old had a serious heart condition. He died 2 years later. It was initially reported that he expired at his desk, but it was soon revealed that Nelson had died in the saddle at the apartment of his 25-year-old aide, Megan Marshak. Johnny Carson got a lot of mileage out of that one. Nelson had 5 children with Mary, Rodman, a businessman, Anne, an author and advocate for Indigenous people, Stephen, a professor of religion, and twins Michael and Mary. When Michael was 23, he went on an expedition with Harvard's Peabody Museum of Archaeology. He and fellow explorers shot a documentary called Dead Birds about the Asmat tribe of New Guinea. On November 17, 1961, Michael and anthropologist Renee Wassing were in a canoe that overturned. Their local guides swam to shore for help. When the sun rose on their second day drifting at sea, Michael decided to use the boat's fuel tank as a float and swim for shore. He may have been as far as 10 miles out. Renee was rescued the next day, but Michael was never seen again. His family believes that he drowned. However, Asmat tribal elders told missionaries that Michael had made it to shore, but that they had killed and eaten him. Michael's twin, Mary, became a therapist. After 9/11, she led a bereavement support group for survivors who had lost their twins. Nelson had at least 2 children with Happy. Nelson, described as a serial businessman, and Mark, chairman of historic Hudson Valley and owner of South Fork Lodge Fishing Resort on Snake River, Idaho. Lawrence Rockefeller was trustee of the Rockefeller Brothers Fund for 42 years. He provided venture capital for Intel, Apple Computers, and many other successful startups. He wed Mary French and they had 4 children. Lawrence's passion was environmentalism. He was declared America's leading conservationist by First Lady Lady Bird Johnson. He also had an interest in crop circles and UFOs, and petitioned the Clinton White House to release information. Lawrence died in 2004, aged 94. Winthrop Rockefeller served in the Pacific during World War II. He married Yovette Bobo Pawaletkut, former Miss Lithuania, who got minor roles in a handful of Hollywood movies under the name Ava Paul. They divorced in 1954. Winthrop moved to Arkansas, where he financed medical clinics in poor areas. He was elected governor in 1966 and integrated the state's schools. He died of pancreatic cancer in 1973, age 60. His only son, Win, was lieutenant governor of Arkansas from 1996. In 2005, he bowed out of the race for governor to seek treatment for a blood disorder. He died the next year at 57. David Rockefeller served in World War II. He loved to travel and made connections with many world leaders. He was CEO of Chase Bank from 1969 to 1980. He lived to 2017, age 101. David was the longest living grandchild of John D. Rockefeller. His estate, worth $3.3 billion, was divided amongst his 6 children. Now let's go back up to John D. Rockefeller's 2 younger brothers, William Jr. and Franklin. When William was just 16, he joined his big brother's produce company as a clerk. He supported John throughout his career and helped him found Standard Oil. On his own initiative, William and a partner purchased Anaconda Copper and used John's model to create their own monopoly. In their mission to dominate, the 2 elder Rockefeller brothers screwed over countless other businessmen. One of them was their own brother, Frank. While John and William paid to outfit Union soldiers, Frank went to fight the Civil War himself. He was wounded in the head during Sherman's march to Atlanta. Back in Cleveland, Frank tried to follow his brothers in the oil business. He invested in the Pioneer Oil Company. This was one of Standard Oil's competitors that was driven out of business. Frank was furious, and a rift was torn between the siblings. Frank moved with his wife and 5 children to an 8,000-acre cattle ranch in Kansas. But as more settlers arrived, the land's value plummeted. He also invested in mines that collapsed and a paper mill that failed. John and William tried to reconcile for many years, but Frank refused to see them. He was the first to die in 1917, age 71. Both John and William came to his funeral, looking tired and careworn. William wed socialite Almira Goodsell. By the time he died in 1922, age 81, Anaconda Copper was the 4th largest company in the world. His 6 children lived atop American society. The most notable were William Godsell, the smartest Rockefeller man of his generation. Many thought that he would take over Standard Oil, but after graduating from Yale, he nearly died from typhoid fever. The illness set him back, and his cousin, John Jr., took the top job instead. William was treasurer of Standard Oil until 1911 and invested in several other companies. The third of his children, James, was a rower at Yale. He won gold in the 1924 Paris Olympics. Then he became president of Citigroup. He also served on the board of the American Museum of Natural History and Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. James married Nancy Carnegie, grandniece of steel tycoon Andrew Carnegie. They had 4 children. Winifred married Dr. Brooks Emeny. They had 4 daughters, though the eldest, Elizabeth, died at 5 years old. Winifred struggled with mental health and was treated in a sanitarium. A few months later, her husband took their teenage daughter Faith with him on a lecture tour. While she was home alone, Winifred put her younger daughters, Winifred 12 and Josephine 6, in the car, started the engine, and locked the garage door. A maid came home to find mother and daughters unconscious. They could not be revived. William's youngest child, Geraldine, had a personal fortune of $101 million. She married Marcellus Hartley Dodge Sr., president of the Remington Arms Company. The couple had only 1 child, Hartley, who died in a car accident at 22. Geraldine donated several buildings to the town of Madison, New Jersey in her son's honor. She was a dog lover. She imported German Shepherds and English Cockers to breed on her farm. She wrote books on and helped to popularize both breeds in the U.S. Her kennel housed up to 150 dogs, with a yearly meat bill of $55,000. Many of Geraldine's pups won Best in Show at Westminster. In 1953, she was the first woman invited to judge the prestigious Kennel Club. She judged dog shows in every U.S. state, plus Germany, Canada, Ireland, and England. Geraldine died in 1973, age 91, and was buried in the family plot in Sleepy Hollow. Download Heyday today by clicking on the link in the description or scanning the QR code. A special thank you goes to my patrons, Brandy Ray and Fern McHenry. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and check out my other history videos. You can also support my work, get early access to all my multi-part series, and other perks by becoming a channel member or joining my Patreon. Thank you for watching.